millionaire guest, only to be rescued by the very maid he never bothered to notice? Gregory Stanton's shirt collar felt like it was tightening around his neck, though the air conditioning hummed steadily inside the hotel lobby. He was 40 years old, the manager of the Mayfield Grand in downtown Phoenix, and he prided himself on composure. But at that moment, composure had abandoned him. The reason was standing right in front of him. Etienne Morel, a French millionaire with a reputation for eccentric demands and little patience. His shoes gleamed, his suit looked like it had been tailored that morning in Paris, and his sharp accent rolled out rapid French words that Gregory couldn't understand. "Excusez-moi, monsieur. Ma chambre. Réservation spéciale," Etienne pressed, his voice raised just enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. Gregory's mind scrambled. He'd taken a semester of French in college, but all he could summon were words like bonjour and merci. He tried anyway. Bonjour, monsieur. Chambre, yes, we have..." His voice trailed off as he gestured toward the reception desk, hoping the words would somehow land, but they didn't. Etienne frowned, impatience etched into the lines of his face. He repeated his request, faster this time, and Gregory felt heat crawling up his neck. Guests in the lobby, a family from Dallas with luggage piled around them, 2 businesswomen sipping coffee near the window, turned their eyes toward the scene. The staff at the front desk froze, pretending to work but sneaking nervous glances. Gregory's heart pounded. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was terrified. The Mayfield Grand had recently been bought by a new chain, and management had warned him, "This is a transition period. We expect excellence, no mistakes." A mishandled VIP guest could mean trouble for his career. "Unbelievable," Gregory muttered under his breath, wiping his palms on his slacks. He forced a strained smile. "Monsieur, one moment, please, one moment." He turned to his assistant manager, who hovered awkwardly nearby. "Do you know any French?" The assistant shook his head quickly, whispering, "Nothing beyond what you just said." Etienne raised his eyebrows. "Vous comprenez? Non? C'est ridicule." His words came with a sharp hand gesture, frustration clear even without translation. Gregory's stomach twisted. The lobby was no longer just a lobby. It felt like a stage. Every set of eyes trained on him as he failed in front of one of the most important guests he'd ever had to serve. His hands twitched as if they didn't know where to rest, and for a moment he imagined this moment ending with him packing his office into cardboard boxes. Monsieur," he stammered again, desperation seeping into his tone. It was at that exact moment, as if the universe had decided to intervene, that a quiet voice from the side spoke up in perfect fluid French. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Morel. Vous devez être fatigué après un si long voyage. Permettez-moi de vous aider." The words cut through the tension like glass breaking. Everyone turned. Standing near one of the brass pillars, polishing rag in hand, was Naomi Clark. She was 24, dressed in the standard Maid uniform, and until that moment had been invisible to Gregory and most others in the lobby. But her voice carried authority and elegance, her French not hesitant or clumsy, but natural. The kind that didn't come from phrasebooks or tourist apps, but from years of fluency. Etienne stopped mid-gesture and turned toward her, his frustration melting into interest. "Ah, enfin. Quelqu'un qui parle ma langue." Naomi set down her rag, walked toward him with calm poise, and continued, "Votre réservation est prête. Si vous avez des demandes particulières, je vais m'en assurer personnellement." Gregory's jaw slackened. He blinked, almost forgetting to breathe. His embarrassment only deepened as he watched the scene shift. The same millionaire who had dismissed Gregory seconds ago now smiled warmly at the maid. Guests around the lobby murmured to each other, a few even smiling at the unexpected twist. Etienne leaned slightly toward Naomi, speaking rapidly, his tone softening into something closer to charm. Naomi listened attentively, nodding, then responded just as fluently. Their exchange was effortless, like 2 musicians playing in harmony. Gregory felt small, painfully small. All he could do was stand there, sweating under his collar, while one of his lowest-ranked employees took control of a situation that had nearly undone him. He noticed the family from Dallas watching Naomi with admiration, whispering something to their kids. The businesswomen near the window stopped sipping coffee, now fully tuned in. Even the front desk clerks relaxed, hiding little smiles behind their hands. Naomi finished her exchange and gave a small, respectful nod to Etienne. "Monsieur Morel, if you follow me, I will take you to your suite. Everything has been prepared." Etienne beamed. "Parfait." "Merci, mademoiselle." And just like that, Naomi led the millionaire across the polished marble floor, her steps steady and confident. The entire lobby shifted with them, the energy lighter, calmer, controlled. Gregory stood frozen, a strange mixture of humiliation and awe coursing through him. He had been manager for almost a decade, but in a single moment, Naomi had shown more authority than he had in years. He swallowed hard, forcing his shoulders back as if to regain some dignity. But deep down, a question burned hotter than the embarrassment. Who exactly was Naomi Clark? But what happened next would not only change how Gregory saw Naomi, but also how he saw himself. The moment the elevator doors closed behind Naomi and Etienne, the lobby erupted in whispers. Guests leaned toward each other, curious. Staff exchanged wide-eyed looks. Gregory forced a weak laugh, as though to signal he still had control, but everyone knew the truth. The young maid had rescued the hotel from disaster. Not him. He retreated quickly toward the front desk, pretending to check paperwork. His assistant, nervous but impressed, muttered under his breath, "Did you know she spoke French like that?" Gregory snapped his head up. "Of course." He lied, though his ears burned. In reality, he had no idea. Naomi had worked at the Mayfield Grand for about a year, hired quietly without fuss. She kept her head down, never late, never causing trouble. To Gregory, she was one of those employees you barely noticed. Until tonight. The minutes stretched. Gregory tried to focus on routine tasks, but his mind replayed her voice, the elegance in her tone, the confidence in her posture. He envied how easily she had done what he could not. And more than envy, he felt threatened. Half an hour later, Naomi returned to the lobby alone. She carried herself with the same calm, her uniform crisp, her hair tied back neatly. Gregory stepped forward, trying to mask his unease. "Naomi," he began, his voice tight. "A word, please." She paused, looking at him directly. Not with arrogance, but with composure. "Yes, Mr. Stanton?" Gregory motioned her toward a quieter corner, near the tall windows overlooking Jefferson Street. He lowered his voice. "Since when do you speak French?" Her answer was simple, almost casual. "Since I was a kid. My mom worked as a translator in San Diego. She taught me." Gregory blinked. He hadn't expected such a straightforward response. "You never mentioned it." "You never asked," Naomi replied. Not defensive, just factual. Gregory's jaw tightened, though he quickly relaxed it, not wanting to show irritation. "Why didn't you tell anyone on staff? Something like that is a valuable skill." Naomi tilted her head slightly, as if weighing whether to continue. "I came here to work, not to brag. I needed the job. I didn't think my language skills mattered if I was cleaning floors." Her honesty stung. Gregory shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his tie. "Well, tonight they mattered a great deal." Naomi said nothing, her calm gaze steady. Gregory cleared his throat. "Thank you for stepping in." Mr. Morel seemed satisfied. She nodded once. He was. He asked if the hotel had staff who spoke other languages. I told him not many. That last sentence felt like a knife. Gregory forced a smile, but his chest tightened. The millionaire now knew the manager didn't speak his language, but the maid did. That imbalance gnawed at Gregory. Before he could continue, a voice boomed from across the lobby. "Mademoiselle Clark!" Etienne himself was striding back toward them, his energy much brighter than when he had arrived. He carried a small leather case and wore the smile of a man who had just found exactly what he was looking for. Naomi turned, greeting him in French once more. "Monsieur Morel, avez-vous trouvé votre suite à votre goût?" Etienne chuckled, replying quickly. "Parfait. Absolument parfait. Mais je dois vous dire, mademoiselle, votre français est remarquable." Gregory stood there like a statue, catching only fragments of the conversation, but understanding enough. Etienne was praising her, calling her remarkable. Naomi modestly answered in French, "Merci. C'est la langue de ma mère. J'ai toujours aimé la parler." Etienne leaned closer, almost conspiratorial. "You must have dinner with me tonight. I insist. I cannot speak English here. It is too frustrating. But with you, enfin, I can breathe." Naomi blinked, startled, and switched back to English out of politeness for Gregory. "Monsieur Morel, that is very kind, but I—" Etienne cut her off, his words warm and persuasive. "No, no, no. I won't take no for an answer. You saved me tonight. At least allow me to show gratitude." Naomi hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Gregory. For a brief second, their gazes met. Gregory's chest tightened again, a cocktail of jealousy and disbelief swirling inside him. His employee, the maid he barely noticed, was being invited to dine with a French millionaire in his hotel. Gregory forced his lips into a smile. "Of course, Naomi. You should accept. It would reflect well on the hotel." The words tasted bitter, but he couldn't risk offending the guest. Naomi's expression was unreadable, but she finally inclined her head. "Very well, Monsieur Morel. I will join you." Etienne clapped his hands once, delighted. "Parfait. We meet at 8. I will wait in the restaurant." He gave a short bow toward Gregory, then walked away, leaving the two standing in silence. Naomi glanced back at Gregory, her tone measured. "Is that all right with you, Mr. Stanton?" Gregory swallowed. "Yes," he said quickly. "Of course. Just be professional." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Always." She turned and walked away, her steps calm, her figure small against the wide lobby floor. Gregory watched her go, his mind buzzing with conflict. He was the manager, but somehow, tonight, she had become the most important person in the building. But that dinner invitation was about to drag all of them into a situation far more complicated than anyone expected. Gregory stood at the reception desk, staring at the reflection of his own face in the polished counter. The sharp lines under his eyes, the stiffness of his jaw, all of it spoke of a man barely holding himself together. He had spent years building a reputation as a competent hotel manager, the sort of man who could anticipate problems before they started. Yet one unexpected guest and one unexpected maid had undone that illusion in less than an hour. He tried to focus on the routine tasks in front of him, confirming bookings, checking arrivals, approving staff schedules, but every line of text blurred on the screen. His mind refused to leave the image of Naomi standing next to Etienne, speaking a language that had flowed from her lips like music. She had looked entirely different in that moment, not like a maid at all, but like someone who belonged in the company of a millionaire. "Mr. Stanton?" his assistant manager asked softly, stepping closer. "You okay?" Gregory straightened, forcing a controlled nod. "Fine. Just busy." But he wasn't fine. His pride had been wounded, and he couldn't deny it. He had been center stage in the lobby, and instead of commanding the moment, he had been reduced to a bystander. Naomi had done what he couldn't, and worse, she had done it without hesitation. At 7:30, Gregory checked the clock and realized the dinner was only half an hour away. He told himself it was no big deal. The guest wanted company, and Naomi was convenient, but deep down, he knew that wasn't the truth. Etienne saw something in her, and Gregory had failed to see it for an entire year. When Naomi reappeared in the staff hallway, she had changed out of her uniform into a simple black dress, still modest but elegant in its own way. Gregory felt another jab of surprise. She didn't just clean well. Apparently she knew how to present herself with style, too. He approached her, keeping his tone formal. "Naomi, a word." She stopped, adjusting the strap of her small handbag. "Yes? I want you to remember this dinner is about professionalism," he said, his voice carrying authority but tinged with insecurity. "You represent the Mayfield Grand tonight. Don't let Mr. Morel think this is anything else." Naomi's brows rose slightly. "I think I understand what professionalism means, Mr. Stanton." Gregory felt his cheeks heat, but pressed on. "Just making sure. This is delicate. He's a demanding guest. Don't let him get too comfortable with you." Her expression softened, though not in a way that reassured him. More like she pitied him. "Mr. Stanton, I can handle myself. And I can handle French millionaires too, apparently. The words stung, though she hadn't spoken them harshly. Gregory clenched his jaw, then forced out, "Very well. Enjoy your dinner." Naomi gave a small nod and walked toward the restaurant, leaving Gregory standing in the hallway, wrestling with his emotions. From a discreet distance, Gregory lingered in the lobby, trying not to look like he was spying. Through the wide glass windows of the hotel restaurant, he could see Naomi and Etienne seated at a corner table. A bottle of wine glistened between them, and their conversation flowed easily. Her expressions animated, his laughter carrying faintly through the glass. Gregory couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. He saw the body language, the way Etienne leaned in, the way Naomi held his gaze, the way the conversation seemed effortless. Gregory's stomach twisted. A bellhop approached him, breaking the spell. "Mr. Stanton, do you need me to handle luggage for the guests checking in from Phoenix Sky Harbor?" Gregory shook his head too quickly. "No, I'll handle it, thank you." But his eyes drifted back to the restaurant window. For the first time, he truly wondered who Naomi Clark was. She wasn't just a maid who had slipped through the cracks of his attention. She was fluent in French. She could dine with millionaires as if she belonged at the table. And she carried herself with a confidence that only came from someone who knew their worth, even if no one else recognized it. Gregory rubbed the back of his neck. Had he been so blind, so wrapped up in titles and uniforms, that he'd failed to notice the talent and intelligence right under his nose? Inside the restaurant, Naomi laughed at something Etienne said, her voice carrying lightly across the lobby. Guests nearby glanced in her direction, intrigued. A maid turned dinner guest, speaking perfect French. It was the kind of story that spread quickly among travelers. Gregory suddenly imagined the ownership hearing about this. What if they decided Naomi was the real asset of the hotel? What if they questioned his leadership, his failure to notice her skills? What if his position, his career, became the next thing on the chopping block? The thoughts consumed him until he finally turned away, retreating back to his office. He shut the door and sat heavily in his chair, staring at the framed certificate on the wall. Manager of Excellence, 2018. It felt like a relic from another lifetime. He pressed his hands against his face, whispering under his breath, "She's just a maid. She's just a maid." But the words rang hollow, and he knew it. Naomi Clark was not just a maid. But the longer that dinner stretched on, the more Gregory realized that his world at the Mayfield Grand was about to tilt in a direction he couldn't control. The restaurant lights glowed softly across white linen tables, giving the room a quiet elegance. At the far corner, where glass windows looked out toward the city streets of Phoenix, Naomi sat opposite Etienne Morel. She held herself with the same calm she had shown in the lobby, though inside she felt the pressure of being the center of attention. A few other diners were stealing glances, whispering, clearly curious why a maid from the hotel was sitting with a man who looked like he owned half of Paris. Etienne poured wine into her glass with practiced charm. "You speak French like a Parisian," he said in English now, his accent thick but clear. "Not like someone who learned it from books." Naomi smiled faintly. "My mother insisted I speak it at home. She said languages open doors. She was right, I guess." Etienne raised his glass. "To your mother, then? A wise woman?" Naomi hesitated, then clinked her glass lightly against his. To her. Through the glass wall, Gregory Stanton stood at the edge of the lobby, half hidden by a tall plant. He pretended to check the placement of a vase, but his eyes kept drifting back to the table. Every laugh Naomi gave, every small gesture Etienne made, felt like a blow to his chest. He told himself he wasn't jealous. He was just watching out for professionalism. But deep down, jealousy and unease twisted together into something he couldn't admit, not even to himself. At the table, Etienne leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Tell me, Naomi, why are you working as a maid? You have intelligence, you have languages, you have presence. A woman like you should not be polishing brass." Naomi's eyes flicked downward briefly. "It's not about what I should be doing. It's about what I had to do. I lost my scholarship during my 3rd year at university. My mom got sick. I needed steady work, so I took what I could find. The Mayfield Grand was hiring." Etienne's expression softened. "Ah, life. It can be cruel, but still, you carry yourself with dignity. That is rare. Naomi gave a small shrug. Dignity doesn't pay the bills. Cleaning rooms does. At least for now. Etienne studied her for a long moment, then said, "You underestimate yourself. With French like yours, I could place you in Paris tomorrow. There are companies desperate for bilingual talent. You'd have a future there." Naomi chuckled lightly, shaking her head. "Paris sounds nice, but my life is here. My mother still needs me. I'm not chasing dreams across the ocean when she's counting on me to be home every night." Etienne raised his hands in surrender. "Fair enough. But still, you are too modest. Tonight you saved me from humiliation. I owe you more than dinner." Naomi leaned back in her chair, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. "You don't owe me anything. I was just doing what needed to be done. Anyone else would have done the same." Etienne laughed. No. You think too kindly. That manager of yours, what is his name? Stanton? He nearly drowned in the lobby. Without you, I would have walked out." Naomi pressed her lips together, choosing not to respond to that. She sipped her wine instead. Meanwhile, Gregory had finally forced himself back into his office, but sitting still was impossible. He paced the carpet, muttering under his breath. He had spent years cultivating an image of authority, yet here he was, invisible in his own hotel, reduced to background noise while his maid entertained the guest he had been supposed to manage. At one point he nearly picked up the phone to call the restaurant, to interrupt and remind Naomi of her professional boundaries. But he stopped himself. That would look desperate. Worse, it might make ownership question his judgment. Still, when 8:30 turned to 9, and then 9:30, his frustration boiled hotter. Naomi wasn't just holding her own. She was thriving. And Etienne seemed charmed enough to forget Gregory even existed. Back in the restaurant, dessert arrived, and Etienne insisted she try the chef's signature soufflé. Naomi laughed softly. "You don't give people much of a chance to say no, do you?" Etienne leaned back with a grin. "In my world, no is only the beginning of negotiation." Naomi rolled her eyes playfully, but then she grew serious. "I'm not someone looking for favors. If you're suggesting something beyond dinner, let's be clear. I'm not here for that." Etienne raised his hands again, his tone sincere. "Mademoiselle, I respect you. This is not about seduction. It is about admiration. You have a gift, and it should not be hidden." Naomi held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Good. I just needed to make sure." From where he lingered just outside the restaurant doors, Gregory felt a knot in his chest. He had heard fragments of that last exchange, enough to know the Frenchman was speaking warmly, sincerely, enough to know Naomi was setting boundaries with poise that he himself lacked. As the evening drew to a close, Etienne rose and kissed Naomi's hand with old-world courtesy. "You were the best part of my arrival in Phoenix. Tomorrow, I will tell your management how extraordinary you are." Naomi thanked him politely, but the words made Gregory's throat tighten. Management. That meant ownership. That meant people above him would hear that Naomi, the maid, was the star of the Mayfield Grand, not the manager. But that promise would soon put Gregory in a position where he had no choice but to confront his own insecurities and Naomi's hidden strength. The next morning, Gregory walked into the lobby with dark circles under his eyes. He had barely slept. Every time he closed them, he saw Naomi sitting across from Etienne, laughing, talking, commanding respect in a way he never had. What bothered him most wasn't the millionaire's attention. It was how natural Naomi had seemed in that world. By mid-morning, the hotel was buzzing with check-ins for a local business conference. Gregory tried to keep himself busy, shaking hands with corporate guests, directing bellhops, reminding clerks of procedures. But no matter how hard he tried, his mind kept circling back to the same problem. Ownership would eventually hear of Etienne's glowing praise for Naomi. And when that happened, questions about his own competency would follow. At 10 sharp, Etienne appeared in the lobby, bright as ever, asking for Naomi directly. Gregory, who had been pretending to review a stack of papers at the reception desk, froze. "She's on shift," he muttered. "Cleaning rooms." Etienne waved dismissively. "Then fetch her. I wish to speak with her again." Gregory forced a polite smile, his insides twisting. Of course, Monsieur Morel. Within minutes, Naomi arrived, carrying her cleaning caddy. She looked slightly out of place standing in the middle of the marble floor with her work supplies, but her composure never faltered. Bonjour, Monsieur Morel, she greeted warmly. Etienne grinned. Ah, mademoiselle. Last night was delightful. Tonight we will continue. Dinner again, yes? But not here. I want to show you the city. There is a French restaurant in Scottsdale. Café Monarch. I hear it is excellent. Naomi hesitated, glancing at Gregory. I don't know if I should. Gregory stepped in quickly. Mr. Morel, I assure you, our staff are very busy. Naomi has her duties. Perhaps another staff member could accompany you. Etienne frowned sharply. No, I ask for her. She is the only one who understands me properly. Surely you see the value for your hotel if I am satisfied. The words cut Gregory like a blade. Etienne wasn't asking, he was demanding, and Gregory knew he couldn't afford to refuse. Ownership would side with a millionaire guest, not with him. He swallowed his pride. Very well. Naomi, adjust your schedule. You'll attend dinner this evening. Naomi gave a small nod, but her eyes lingered on Gregory's face, as if she sensed the storm brewing behind his forced smile. That night, she arrived at Café Monarch dressed simply but elegantly, her presence commanding attention even without expensive clothes. Etienne was already there, waiting with a bottle of Bordeaux on the table. As they ate, he asked question after question, switching between French and English with ease. Where did you study? What were your dreams before you came here? What would you do if money were no object? Naomi answered honestly, sometimes laughing, sometimes quiet. She spoke of her love for literature, how she had once studied international relations, how she had dreamed of working for an embassy or a global non-profit. But life, with its sharp turns, had left her here, cleaning rooms, supporting her mother. Etienne listened intently. You carry disappointment with grace. That is rare. But tell me, Naomi, do you ever regret it? Naomi sipped her water before answering. Regret? Sometimes. But I've learned that people are more than their job titles. A maid can be a linguist. A manager can be insecure. A millionaire can be lonely. Titles don't tell the whole story. Etienne chuckled softly. Spoken like a philosopher. Naomi smiled. Spoken like someone who's had to remind herself not to give up. Unbeknownst to her, Gregory had driven past Café Monarch that evening. He hadn't planned to, but something had pulled him there. He parked across the street, sitting in his car with the engine off, staring at the glow of the restaurant. Through the window, he could just make out Naomi's figure, gesturing as she spoke, and Etienne's attentive expression. The sight made Gregory's hands grip the steering wheel until his knuckles turned pale. He hated himself for spying, but he couldn't stop. He needed to know what was happening, needed to know how much influence this Frenchman might have over her, and by extension, over the hotel's perception of Gregory himself. Back inside, the meal wound down with dessert and coffee. Etienne leaned forward, lowering his voice. Naomi, I want to recommend you personally to some of my business associates, people who can change your life. Would you allow me to do that? Naomi blinked, caught off guard. That's generous, but I don't want to seem ungrateful to the hotel. They gave me a job when I needed it. Etienne shook his head. Jobs like this keep you alive, but opportunities like these give you a future. Do not confuse the two. Naomi fell silent, his words echoing inside her. She had always thought of her work as temporary, a necessity, but the thought of escaping it, of stepping into something greater, stirred something she had buried long ago. When she finally returned to the hotel later that night, Gregory was waiting near the staff entrance, pretending he had been checking inventory. How was dinner? He asked tightly. Naomi studied him for a moment. Productive. He wants to connect me with people who could help my career. Gregory forced a smile, but his voice cracked. Be careful, Naomi. Men like him don't just give without expecting something in return. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Maybe men like you think that way. But not everyone's motives are as shallow as you assume. Gregory flinched, stung. She walked past him without another word, leaving him standing in the dim hallway, realizing that for the first time in years, someone had seen straight through him. But the deeper Naomi stepped into this new light, the more Gregory felt himself being pushed into the shadows, and that pressure was about to boil over. The morning sun poured through the wide glass doors of the Mayfield Grand, but Gregory felt no warmth from it. He sat stiffly in his office, scrolling through emails with a knot in his stomach. A message from ownership blinked at the top of his screen. Mr. Morell has spoken highly of a staff member, Ms. Naomi Clark. Please provide a detailed report on her role within the hotel. Gregory read it 3 times, his jaw tightening. They hadn't asked about his handling of Mr. Morell. They hadn't commended him for maintaining the hotel's reputation. No, the focus was entirely on Naomi. He pushed his chair back, pacing the carpeted floor. He had built this career brick by brick, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and even his health at times. Yet now, in a matter of days, a maid had eclipsed him in the eyes of ownership. A knock interrupted his spiral. His assistant manager, Julia Marks, stepped in with a folder. "Gregory, you might want to see this." Feedback from last night's guests. He snatched the folder, flipping it open. Several comment cards mentioned Naomi by name. The young woman who spoke French was remarkable. She handled our questions with such grace. "I've never seen a maid act with such professionalism. She should be running the place." Gregory slammed the folder shut, his chest tight. Julia flinched. "Sorry," he muttered, softening his tone. "Thank you, Julia. I'll look into it." When she left, Gregory sank into his chair, pressing his palms against his eyes. He was supposed to be the face of the hotel, the one who impressed the guests. Now Naomi was being praised for skills he hadn't even known she had. Later that afternoon, he wandered into the staff lounge, searching for coffee. He found Naomi sitting at a table with 2 housekeepers, laughing softly as she translated a note one of them had received from a French guest. The other housekeepers watched her with admiration, as if she were suddenly more than just a peer. Gregory stood in the doorway, unseen for a moment, and listened. He said he was touched that someone actually took the time to listen to him. Naomi explained, her voice warm. "Sometimes that's all people want, to feel understood." The housekeepers nodded eagerly, thanking her. Naomi smiled, but it wasn't boastful. It was genuine, the kind of smile that drew people in without effort. Gregory cleared his throat loudly, making his presence known. Naomi looked up, her expression calm as always. "Mr. Stanton." "Naomi," he said, crossing his arms. "I need a word with you." "Alone." The housekeepers exchanged a look, then slipped out quickly. When the door closed, Gregory stepped closer. "You're becoming quite popular with the guests." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Is that a problem?" Gregory hesitated. "It's not about problems. It's about balance. The attention is good for the hotel, yes, but it also raises questions. People might start to think you're more than what you were hired to be." Her eyes sharpened. "And what exactly was I hired to be? Invisible?" Gregory's lips parted, but no words came out. Naomi continued, her voice steady. "I clean rooms, yes. I polish brass. But that doesn't mean I don't have value beyond that. You treat the uniform like it defines me. But it doesn't." Gregory's pulse quickened. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" Naomi asked softly. "You've managed this place for years, but you've never once asked about my background, my skills, my life. You assumed I was just another maid. Last night, Mr. Morell didn't assume. He listened." The words landed like a blow. Gregory swallowed hard, his pride battling with the truth she was throwing at him. He took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "Naomi, I appreciate what you did, but be careful. Attention like this can fade just as quickly as it arrives. Don't let it go to your head." Naomi studied him for a long moment, then stood. "I'm not the one letting it go to my head." She walked past him, leaving Gregory rooted in place, the sting of her words echoing in the empty lounge. Hours later, Gregory sat at his desk again, staring blankly at the ownership email. He could write a glowing report about Naomi, praising her skills and confirming what Etienne had said. Or he could downplay it, making her sound ordinary, keeping the spotlight on himself. But every time he tried to type, The memory of her voice cut through his thoughts. "You assumed I was just another maid." He leaned back, closing his eyes. The weight of his own arrogance pressed down on him, heavier than he wanted to admit. But as Gregory wrestled with his pride, the rest of the staff began to see Naomi not as a maid, but as something more, and soon even the guests would start demanding her by name. By the end of the week, Naomi Clark was no longer just another maid at the Mayfield Grand. Guests were asking for her directly, slipping her name into comment cards, and even pulling aside front desk staff to say how impressed they were with her grace. Word traveled quickly, not only among the guests but also through the staff. It seemed every employee, from bellhops to bartenders, now carried a quiet respect for Naomi. Gregory noticed it most during the Friday evening rush. A couple from Toronto approached the front desk, struggling to explain in broken English that they needed directions. Gregory stepped forward, eager to handle it himself, but the wife smiled brightly and asked, "Excuse me, is Naomi available?" The request hit Gregory like a slap. He forced a polite smile. "She's on another task. I can help you." But before he could continue, Naomi appeared behind him, her uniform immaculate, her presence calm. "Bonsoir," she said warmly, slipping into their language with ease. The couple's faces lit up immediately. Within minutes, she had given them clear directions, even recommending a local cafe she thought they'd enjoy. They thanked her profusely, barely glancing back at Gregory. He clenched his jaw, pretending not to notice the dismissal, but the sting lingered. This was supposed to be his domain. Yet somehow Naomi had become the face guests associated with professionalism. Later that night, Gregory walked the halls, checking on staff. He overheard two clerks at the front desk whispering excitedly, "Did you see how easily she handled them? It's like she was born for this." "Yeah, honestly, she's better with guests than Gregory is sometimes." Gregory froze just out of sight, his stomach twisting. He wanted to storm over, remind them he was still their boss, but instead he walked away quietly, his shoes echoing down the hallway. Meanwhile, Naomi herself seemed unaffected by the attention. She continued her duties, moving from room to room with the same steady focus she had always shown. When guests praised her, she smiled graciously, but never bragged. When staff leaned on her for help, she offered it willingly. But the more she rose in the eyes of others, the more Gregory felt himself shrinking. The breaking point came on Saturday morning. Ownership had sent a representative, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Vaughan, to check in on the hotel. Gregory met her at the entrance, determined to make a strong impression. "Mr. Stanton," she greeted briskly. "I've heard good things about your staff this week, particularly a young woman named Naomi Clark." Gregory forced a smile. "Yes, she's been helpful." Patricia adjusted her glasses, scanning the lobby. "Helpful? Mr. Morell described her as indispensable. That is not the same thing. Where is she? I'd like to meet her personally." Before Gregory could respond, Naomi appeared, carrying a tray of fresh linens. Patricia's face brightened instantly. "You must be Ms. Clark," Patricia said warmly. "I've heard remarkable things. It's not often a maid becomes the highlight of a guest's stay. Tell me, how long have you been with us?" Naomi shifted the tray to one arm, offering her hand. "A little over a year. It's been steady work. I'm grateful for it." Patricia shook her hand firmly. "Grateful? You should be proud. The way Mr. Morell described you, you have the skills of management. Have you considered moving beyond housekeeping?" Gregory's chest tightened. He jumped in quickly. "Patricia, with all due respect, Naomi's role here is important as it is. Transitioning her to management would leave a gap in—" Patricia raised a hand, silencing him. "I didn't ask you, Gregory. I asked her." Naomi blinked, caught between the two. "I've thought about it, yes, but right now, my focus is on supporting my family. My mum's health makes it hard for me to think about career moves." Patricia's gaze softened. "Understandable, but talent like yours shouldn't be hidden. When you're ready, the company has development programs for staff exactly like you. Keep that in mind." Naomi smiled politely. "Thank you. I will." Gregory stood stiffly at her side, his pride crushed. The representative hadn't come to check on him. She had come to meet Naomi. After Patricia left, Gregory cornered Naomi in the staff hallway. His voice was low, sharp. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" Naomi frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're undermining me," he hissed. "This hotel doesn't run on one person's charm. It runs on structure, order, leadership. And that's me." Naomi's expression hardened. "I'm not trying to undermine you, Mr. Stanton. I'm just doing my job. If people appreciate it, that's not my fault." Gregory stepped closer, his voice rising. "You're turning staff against me. You're making guests think I can't do my job. Do you know what that does to my reputation?" Naomi's tone sharpened in return. "Maybe your reputation isn't the problem. Maybe it's how you treat people. You only notice someone when they threaten you. That's not leadership, Mr. Stanton. That's fear." The words struck like a hammer. Gregory froze, his mouth opening but no response coming out. Naomi walked past him, her back straight, leaving him in the hallway with his pride in tatters. But that confrontation only widened the rift, pushing Gregory closer to breaking, and setting the stage for a clash that the entire staff would soon witness. By Sunday evening, tension inside the Mayfield Grand had become impossible to ignore. Staff whispered about the manager's foul mood, and even guests picked up on the stiffness in Gregory Stanton's smile. He barked orders at bellhops, corrected clerks on minor details, and stalked the hallways like a man waiting for an explosion. That explosion finally came just before dinner service. Naomi had been helping a guest from Quebec check in, translating seamlessly while the front desk clerk entered details into the computer. Her French flowed easily, reassuring the older couple who had looked nervous at first. The woman patted Naomi's hand gratefully, saying, "Vous êtes merveilleuse." The moment Naomi stepped away from the desk, Gregory intercepted her. His voice was low but sharp, his eyes glinting with suppressed rage. "In my office, now!" She raised an eyebrow, but followed without protest. Staff members glanced at each other uneasily as the two disappeared behind the office door. Inside, Gregory shut it firmly and turned on her. "Do you have any idea how this looks? Guests asking for you by name, ownership praising you like you run the place, while I'm treated like a background prop in my own hotel." Naomi set down the clipboard she had been carrying, her voice calm. "With respect, Mr. Stanton, I can't control how people react. I just do my job." He slammed his hand on the desk. "Your job is cleaning rooms, Naomi. Not running the front desk, not charming millionaires, not making me look incompetent." For a moment, silence filled the room. Naomi stood still, her expression steady. Then she stepped closer, her tone measured but firm. "You're the one making yourself look incompetent. I didn't take your authority. You gave it up the moment you decided people like me didn't matter." Gregory blinked, thrown off by her directness. "Excuse me?" "You never saw me," Naomi said, her voice unwavering. "Not once in the year I've worked here. You passed me in hallways, handed me schedules, maybe said good morning when you felt like it, but you never asked about my skills, my background, or my story. You assumed a uniform defined me. That's on you, not me." Gregory's breath came fast. He paced behind his desk, clenching and unclenching his fists. "Do you know what's at stake for me? Ownership is breathing down my neck. One mistake and I could lose everything I've worked for. And now you—" He jabbed a finger toward her. "You're becoming the star of the hotel. What am I supposed to do? Stand aside while a maid overshadows me?" Naomi's eyes flashed. "Maybe you should. Because leadership isn't about making sure everyone stays beneath you. It's about lifting people up. If you can't handle that, then maybe you're in the wrong job." The words hung heavy in the air. Gregory stopped pacing, his face pale, his chest heaving. "You think you know everything, don't you?" he said, his voice lower now, almost trembling. "You think just because you speak a fancy language and a millionaire likes you, you understand what it means to run a hotel. You don't. You've never felt the pressure of having ownership expect perfection every second of every day. You've never had to answer for every mistake, every complaint, every broken detail. You think it's easy? You think I'm insecure. Maybe I am. But you have no idea what it's like to sit in this chair." Naomi didn't flinch. "You're right. I've never sat in that chair. But I do know what it's like to work twice as hard for half the recognition. I know what it's like to be underestimated because of a uniform. and I know what it's like to have to prove myself every single day. So maybe I don't know your stress, Mr. Stanton. But don't pretend you know mine." The office door suddenly opened. Etienne Morel stepped inside without knocking, his presence filling the room instantly. His sharp eyes moved between Gregory and Naomi, sensing the tension like smoke after a fire. "Ah," Etienne said smoothly, switching to English for Gregory's sake. "Am I interrupting?" Gregory stiffened. "Mr. Morel, this is a private matter." Etienne raised a hand. "Nonsense. Nothing in a hotel is private. Everything affects the guest experience, and I must say Mademoiselle Clark has provided the best experience I've had in years." Gregory's face flushed. "With respect, Mr. Morel, this is still my hotel to manage." Etienne stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Then manage it. But do not diminish her. Without her, I would have walked out your doors the first night. Do you understand?" The silence that followed was crushing. Gregory felt every ounce of authority slipping from him, yet he couldn't bring himself to argue further. Naomi, however, spoke softly. "Mr. Morel, thank you, but please, don't make this about choosing sides. This is bigger than me or Mr. Stanton." Etienne studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You are wise, mademoiselle. Perhaps wiser than your manager." Gregory's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, to defend himself, but the words stuck. Instead, he lowered his eyes, the shame of being called out in front of both Naomi and a millionaire guest burning hotter than any criticism ownership had ever given him. But the confrontation didn't end in that office, because once the staff learned what had happened, Gregory's grip on authority would unravel faster than he could imagine. By Monday morning, word of the confrontation in Gregory's office had already spread through the hotel. No one knew the exact details. Staff weren't in the room, after all, but whispers carried fast. Bellhops traded versions of the story in the service elevator. Housekeepers whispered about it over carts of fresh towels. Even the bartenders had their own spin. The common thread was always the same. Naomi Clark had stood toe-to-toe with the manager, and Etienne Morel himself had sided with her. Gregory walked through the lobby that morning feeling the weight of every glance. Staff looked at him differently now. Some sympathetic, others curious, but most with a faint glimmer of judgment. It was as if the invisible thread of respect that held his authority together had frayed overnight. He tried to project confidence. He adjusted his tie, spoke briskly, issued orders as usual. But he could see it in their eyes. His words didn't carry the same weight anymore. At noon, Etienne requested a meeting in the lobby lounge. Gregory arrived to find Naomi already seated across from the Frenchman, a small notebook in her hand. She looked professional, composed, more like an assistant manager than a maid. Etienne greeted Gregory with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Monsieur Stanton, please sit. We are discussing ways to improve the guest experience here." Gregory's jaw clenched, but he sat. "That's my responsibility." Etienne leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Yes, but your staff are your most valuable resource. And Naomi, Mademoiselle Clark, has ideas worth hearing. She told me about her experience with international guests. Did you know she once volunteered at a cultural center, helping new arrivals adjust to life here? She understands hospitality at its core." Gregory's mouth went dry. He hadn't known that. He hadn't asked. Naomi glanced at him, her voice calm but firm. "I wasn't trying to undermine you, Mr. Stanton. I was just answering his questions." Etienne interjected. "She does not undermine you. She elevates this place. If you cannot see that, then perhaps you do not understand leadership." The words hit like a hammer. Guests at nearby tables glanced over, sensing tension in the air. Gregory's face burned, but he forced himself to speak evenly. "Mr. Morel, I appreciate your feedback, but this is an internal matter." Etienne shook his head. "When it affects the guest experience, it is not internal. It is fundamental. This hotel shines when Naomi speaks, when she helps. That is the truth. Ignore it if you wish, but you will pay for that blindness." Naomi closed her notebook, sensing Gregory's humiliation deepening. "Maybe we should pause this conversation," she suggested gently. But the damage was already done. Gregory excused himself stiffly, retreating to his office once again. His reflection in the glass walls of the hallway looked like a man on the verge of breaking. That evening, Patricia Vaughan, the representative from ownership, returned unexpectedly. Gregory scrambled to meet her in the lobby, hoping to salvage some dignity. But Patricia's first words crushed him. "I've had several glowing reports about Naomi Clark from guests, Mr. Stanton. Even our corporate office has noticed. What exactly is your plan for her?" Gregory swallowed hard. "She's an excellent employee, but she was hired for housekeeping." Patricia frowned. "And yet she is excelling in areas far beyond that. Don't you think it reflects poorly on you that a maid is outshining her own manager?" The sentence landed like a blade between his ribs. He forced a smile. "I'll review her role." Later that night, he found Naomi alone in the staff lounge, jotting notes into her notebook. He lingered in the doorway, watching her. She looked calm, focused, almost like she belonged to a world beyond the hotel walls. Finally, he stepped inside. "Naomi." She looked up, cautious. "Mr. Stanton." Gregory sat across from her, his shoulders heavy. For the first time, his voice lacked its usual sharp edge. "You've made me see things I didn't want to. I've been so focused on protecting my position that I forgot what leadership actually means. It's not about control. It's about recognizing value, even when it comes from places you don't expect." Naomi studied him for a long moment. "That's true." He exhaled slowly. "I've treated you unfairly, dismissed you without realizing what you brought to the table. For that, I'm sorry." The apology surprised even him. The words tasted foreign, but also freeing. Naomi closed her notebook, leaning back slightly. "Thank you. But an apology only matters if things actually change." Gregory nodded. "I know. And they will." The silence stretched, but it wasn't hostile this time. It was the silence of something shifting, the beginnings of a fragile truce. But Gregory's admission wasn't the end, because the final test of his humility would come when Naomi's recognition went public, and ownership forced him to decide whether to fight her rise or help it. 2 days later, the Mayfield Grand hosted a small press event. Ownership wanted to showcase the hotel's commitment to excellence as part of their new branding push, and they invited local media to cover it. Gregory Stanton was supposed to be the face of the event, the manager who represented stability and professionalism. He had ironed his best suit, practiced his talking points, and forced himself to smile in the mirror until it looked convincing. But when the event began in the grand lobby, it was Naomi Clark the reporters wanted to talk to. Word of her handling of Etienne Morel had traveled fast, amplified by his glowing comments to ownership. He had even mentioned her in an interview with a French business journal, praising the young woman in Phoenix who saved an entire hotel with her kindness and fluency. As cameras flashed, Patricia Vaughan stepped up to the podium. She delivered a brief speech about the Mayfield Grand's values, then surprised Gregory by inviting Naomi to the front. "This hotel thrives because of people like Naomi Clark," Patricia said clearly. "She reminds us that talent is not limited to titles. Hospitality is about human connection, and Naomi embodies that." The applause was loud, echoing across the marble lobby. Naomi looked almost startled, but she carried herself with calm dignity as she joined Patricia. A reporter immediately asked her a question in French, and she answered flawlessly, her voice steady and elegant. The cameras snapped faster. Gregory stood off to the side, his prepared notes crumpling slightly in his hand. Every instinct screamed at him to step forward, to reclaim the spotlight, to remind everyone that he was the manager. But he stayed where he was, frozen between pride and realization. When Naomi finished answering, she turned slightly, her eyes finding his in the crowd. For a brief moment, it felt as if the entire room fell away, and it was just the two of them. Later, after the event ended and the reporters dispersed, Gregory found Naomi alone in the staff hallway, leaning against the wall with her notebook in hand. She looked tired, but composed. "You did well," Gregory said quietly. Naomi glanced up, studying him. "It wasn't about me. It was about the hotel," he nodded slowly. "That's what I've been missing. I kept thinking leadership was about protecting myself, guarding my authority. But tonight, I realized it's about letting others shine when they deserve it." Naomi tilted her head slightly, curious. Do you really believe that? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? Gregory let out a tired laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. I've spent too much energy pretending. So no, this isn't for you. It's for me. I can't keep leading like I did. Fear isn't leadership. Pride isn't leadership. I see that now. Naomi softened, her voice gentle. Then prove it. Not with speeches, not with apologies. With actions. Gregory met her gaze and nodded. I will. Over the next week, he did something no one expected. He began changing his approach. Instead of barking orders, he asked for input. Instead of dismissing staff, he took time to learn their names, their stories, their strengths. When Naomi translated for another French guest, Gregory didn't bristle. He praised her openly in front of the staff. Slowly, the mood in the hotel shifted. One afternoon, Gregory called Naomi into his office again. This time, the air was lighter. He handed her a folder labeled Development Program. Staff Advancement. This is from ownership, he explained. They want to offer you a spot. It's training for management. I recommended you. Naomi blinked, surprised. You recommended me? Gregory smiled faintly. Yes, because you deserve it. And because the hotel deserves someone like you in leadership. She studied him for a long moment, then gave a small smile. Thank you. That means more than you think. Gregory leaned back in his chair, exhaling. Naomi, you taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. People aren't defined by their titles. Respect isn't given because of a suit or a nameplate. It's earned by how you treat others. I forgot that. But you reminded me. Naomi closed the folder gently, her smile widening just slightly. Then maybe we both learned something. You learned to see people, and I learned not to underestimate myself. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was peaceful, almost like closure. That evening, as Gregory walked through the lobby, he noticed the staff moving with more confidence, more ease. Guests smiled. The hotel felt alive again. He realized it wasn't because of him. Not directly. It was because he had finally stepped aside and allowed others to flourish. And for the first time in weeks, he felt something close to relief. Life has a way of humbling us when we think we're untouchable. Gregory learned that leadership isn't about clinging to power. It's about lifting people up. Naomi learned that even if the world tries to keep you small, your worth can't stay hidden forever. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Never underestimate someone, and never let pride blind you to the value of others. So if this story struck something in you, if it reminded you of a time you were overlooked or a time you misjudged someone, take it with you. Think about how you treat people in your daily life. Respect can change everything. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe. There's always another story waiting, one that might just change the way you see the world.